What's going on, everyone? TM24 here, and we are back with some more Marvel Snap content. Now, if you're just now finding the channel, welcome. I hope you enjoyed the video. We're talking about a High Evolutionary Lockjaw deck. If you are a returning viewer, thank you for the continued support. I really do appreciate it. My llama here, he really appreciates it as well. But let's start talking about this Hejaw High Evolutionary Lockjaw deck. So this is probably the second or third deck that I've experimented with High Evolutionary. The first one was the High Evolutionary Lockdown deck that has Storm, Spider-Man, Professor X, cards like that in it. And I wanted to try something a little bit different. And Lockjaw, I haven't really given him a whole lot of play ever since he was nerfed a while back. When the Thanos Lockjaw decks were around, that was probably the last time I played Lockjaw. So I figured I would give him another shot, and High Evolutionary just seemed like a really good place for him. So this is the deck that we came up with here. Probably pretty standard to most of the other lists that you'll see of this style of deck. I do know a lot of people are running an Infinite, but I opted to go with the Cyclops instead, just because I like to make sure I have a turn 3 play. So having Lockjaw, Cyclops, or Thor as turn 3s are huge for me. So that's why I decided to go with Cyclops instead of, the Infinite or something bigger. I've found this deck to be really, really consistent and really strong, being able to put out tons of power that your opponent simply can't keep up with. So we'll talk about this deck, but it's pretty straightforward, right? We've got the High Evolutionary package with, of course, himself. We've got Wasp, Cyclops, the Thing, and Hulk in here as well. So pretty standard base. If I had to choose the best cards that High Evolutionary affects, it's going to be those ones in, some random order, but I definitely think those are the best ones of that package. So our only 0 cost is going to be Wasp. We don't have any 1 or 2 costs. Now, that's not necessarily a problem, but if you're not hitting a 3-drop, it can feel pretty bad. And it can be a little bit tough. You want to get multiple procs out of your Lockjaw if possible, and typically you want to bring something super strong. So that's why we're a bit heavy, but like I said, it can be a little bit tough if you're not hitting the right cards. So no 1s or 2s, we're skipping those turns. A little bit tough, but ultimately it can be fine because that is also buffing your Hulk. So not necessarily a bad thing, but just something to kind of be aware of. Our 3-drops we kind of talked about a little bit. They're Lockjaw, Cyclops, and Thor. We talked about Cyclops in that he is one of the better cards in the High Evolutionary package. If I were to cut one card, it would probably be him. But like I said, I like to make sure I have a turn 3 option. Lockjaw, of course, this is a deck kind of built around him, and getting multiple procs out of, say, Wasp, potentially out of Thor's Mjolnir, and that, Lockjaw is hopefully pulling things like the Thing, like Dr. Doom, the Hulk, cards like that. Thor, we talked about a little bit. It's going to add another one of those 0 drops. So ideally, you can get multiple pulls from Mjolnir, buffing Thor up, and Lockjaw pulling cards out of your deck. Kind of a 2-for-1 there. Really love Thor in this deck, especially because we're running Jane as well. It makes sense. Our 4-drops, we've got 3 of them. We got Jubilee, High Evolutionary, and the Thing. We already talked about High Evolutionary. It's built around him and Lockjaw, so he's obviously going to be in this deck. I really like the Thing. I think the Thing is probably the strongest out of the High Evolutionary package. He's essentially a 4/9, which is kind of insane. So I think he is huge. He is a great inclusion in this deck. Playing him alone just a lot of times feels really, really strong. So definitely think he should be included in this. Jubilee also just makes sense, right? We've got a ton of cards that are higher cost, so her pulling pretty much anything is going to feel good. Even if she pulls something like Thor or Cyclops, ultimately it's not that bad. If she pulls Wasp or Mjolnir, yeah, maybe that's a little bit tough. because that lane is pretty much lost at that point. But her upside is too great. Definite inclusion in this deck. We've only got one 5-drop, and that's going to be Jane, and she's here to pull that Wasp, to pull Mjolnir, to make sure that we are, we have access to those cards so that we can send them through Lockjaw. And then we come to our 6-drops, and we've got 4 of them. We've got Dr. Doom, we've got Odin, America Chavez, and Hulk. We talked about Hulk a little bit already. He's part of the High Evolutionary package. He is going to be buffed up because we won't have plays on probably turn 1 and 2. Even if you have Wasp in your hand, you're not going to play Wasp until 3 and running it through Lockjaw. So Hulk is already going to be buffed up twice, so definite inclusion. Dr. Doom, I think, is huge, being able to kind of spread your power thin. Dr. Doom is probably one of the better 6-drops in the game, and going wide, he is crucial. Now, Odin is in this deck as well, and he's got a lot of synergy, right? He can hit your Jubilee and pull another one. He can hit Wasp and the Thing, proccing their on reveals as well. Dr. Doom is great as well, so you can get a ton of value out of Odin. Now, the one thing is, if he's pulled early by Lockjaw or Jubilee, it's okay because you get another proc, so you get another pull. That lane is pretty much filled at that point, which is a little bit tough, but ultimately that's a ton of value for, a turn 4 play, essentially. Now, if he's pulled by Lockjaw, that's a little bit different. That can feel a little bit bad, but again, you're getting 8 power for, the value of a Wasp just running through Lockjaw. I think the upside from Odin is additionally too great to not have him in this deck. Now, the other 6-drop is going to be Chavez, and I love Chavez just because of the consistency, right? She's going to help make sure that you're pulling the cards that you need to pull. So ideally, your draw is going to be more consistent. You're going to hit those Lockjaws. You're going to hit Jubilee. You're going to get cards that you can play, and you don't have to worry about Chavez being pulled. You can get her pulled from Jubilee and Lockjaw, which feels great. That means on turn 6, you're not necessarily drawing her, and you can draw something else. That's the one thing that frustrates me a little bit with this deck, is that if you don't pull her, you're drawing her on 6. So that means that's your card, right? So either you're playing Chavez or you're playing something else in your hand. I would love to maybe potentially, take her out, instead replace her with an Infinite, and that way you've got a chance of maybe pulling that Wasp again or pulling that Mjolnir again after they've been through Lockjaw. But the consistency that she brings probably outweighs the potential, power potential of having something like the Infinite instead, because you're going to have a lot easier climb if you can consistently play your Lockjaws and your Jubilees and not have a hand full of, Hulk, Infinite, Odin, Dr. Doom, things like that. So I think this is a really, really consistent list. I think it's really strong in the fact that it can put out a bunch of power thanks to Lockjaw. You can reach lanes that you otherwise wouldn't be able to with Dr. Doom. Something like Death's Domain doesn't hurt that bad because you've got Jubilee and Dr. Doom. So I think this deck is probably one of the better ones right now, and it's actually the deck that I'm currently using to climb. We're almost to infinite right now, so this deck it's really doing it for me. I think High Evolutionary is huge. I think any deck that he's in is going to be a very, very strong deck, and I think this is probably one of the better ones that you can play. So if you've got these cards, I definitely say you would give it a shot. But right now, we've got a few games that I'll just walk you through my thought process, why we were playing what we played, and you'll kind of see what this deck can do. So this one just ended, and right here, we get our opening hand, and it is a bit heavy. We get Quantum Tunnel, so basically we get a Lockjaw in the form of a location, which is great for us. Isle of Silence, not too bad, except for the Hulk. So that's something that potentially we want to stay away from, but we don't necessarily have to, because Hulk at 12 is still a very, very good play. So turn 1, turn 2, a lot of times we aren't going to have a play. So we went ahead and passed. Turn 3, we get Lockjaw down, so that we basically have 2 lanes that are now Lockjaw. And we're going to start, hopefully, pulling these cards from our deck. We pick up the Thing, which is a little bit tough because we would rather see the Wasp. We have Jubilee as well, and we're looking at potentially just throwing her on Lockjaw. We can't put her into the Quantum Tunnel because of Goose, so ultimately it is the decision to put her into the Isle of Silence and send her through Lockjaw and see what we get. We do get a little bit fortunate here as they pull their own Killmonger, destroying their Kitty Pryde and their Nova early. We do pull Jane, which is great because that means we get that Wasp. And then Lockjaw gives us Cyclops as well. I love Cyclops. I do think he's probably one of the better high evolutionary cards. He might be right behind the Thing. So it might be Thing 1, Cyclops 2, and potentially Wasp 3, maybe Hulk 3. Hulk can get insane. But I definitely think that the Thing and Cyclops are probably 2 of the better ones. In this turn, we decide to throw Thor through. And then we are throwing the Wasp through the Quantum Tunnel. We're going to get that effect, and it's going to pull our Jubilee, which is going to pull Mjolnir, buffing our Thor. Not exactly what we were looking for. We were hoping to hit something big there, potentially Chavez, maybe Jane to get those cards back, but ultimately not too bad of a play either. And here's where it's easy. You can just send Dr. Doom through. You get those 5s on the Quantum Tunnel and Hulla, and you'll get whatever Lockjaw pulls. We still have a few good cards in our deck that he could pull. And ultimately, we end up getting the Wasp. We're going to take that effect on the Bishop and the Mysterio. And they're sending one last card through the Quantum Tunnel. It's Enchantress. And they pull a Mysterio. So we end up tying in Hulla. We've got a ton of power in the Isle of Silence. We got just a ton of value from Lockjaw, and we end up getting another win right there. Now this one, Asteroid, we have a lot of 3 and 4 drops. Actually, half of our deck, to be exact, is 3 or 4. So that's a location that can be a little bit tough for us, just because most of our stuff is going to want to, to end up over there. Again, no turn 1, no turn 2. I wouldn't have a turn 3 unless I had Cyclops in this deck, and luckily we did, so we can go ahead and feel free to toss him over into the raft, but we know he's going to Asteroid anyway. We're also going to get a free card here in the X-Mansion, and we end up getting... They get Jeff, which is actually pretty nice. We get Shocker, so same in terms of power, but we do have a little bit, a little bit less, I would say, just because Jeff can move and our Shocker is stuck. We are able to then play the Thing into that Asteroid lane, which is huge. We're adding 6 and taking away 3. All of a sudden, we're up 8 in that location. Now, here, we pick up Lockjaw. We have Thor. Both of those plays don't feel all that strong, just because we don't have the Wasp. We don't have Mjolnir, anything like that. We don't want to play Jane just to pull the Wasp. Unfortunately, we get the Wasp anyway, and Jubilee gets sent over to Asteroid. So this game has honestly been a bit rough. We are in a tough position. Luckily, Cyclops can still go off. We're still getting more value out of him. And now we're just down to one final play, right? Hulk is at 18 power, which is absolutely massive. Going to be tough for them to come back. We felt really good about Asteroid. They had no way of coming back there. And they end up playing a Hellcow and a Scorpion. So they end up taking the X-Mansion. They left the Raft alone. I don't know if they thought that potentially we were going to just play an X-Mansion. We would have won regardless because of the power level that Hulk was at already. I think this is the last one I've got for you here. And you see, we do have an early game play, but we're not going to send the Wasp through just because there's no point in playing her without being able to send her through Lockjaw. I mean, that's what she's there for. So we're going to wait. We're going to wait turn 1, turn 2. Vormir, she's actually not a bad option there because we can clear the way for other cards there. but the value she provides in pulling something out of Lockjaw and reducing the power of our opponent is ultimately just too much. We do get a little bit lucky and we pick up Lockjaw on 3. So we're going to go ahead and look to get him down. We're thinking the Strange Academy, and the reason we wanted to do that was in case our cards can get pushed into Vormir without us actually having to trigger it ourselves. So we get Lockjaw down and we send the Wasp through. Yes, we miss out on her on reveal, but ultimately that is not a big deal. We do end up pulling Odin here, and I talked about this a little bit. It can feel a little bit bad when we pull that Odin just because we don't get any extra value out of him. Now, we do have a solid turn 3 play here in getting Thor down, and that'll make our turn 5 really easy as well. We can play Jane, we can draw Mjolnir, we can draw the Wasp, and we know we've got a couple cards that we can start sending through. They play Jubilee, and they get their own Jane already, so they're going to draw Mjolnir, and they've got that loaded and ready to go. So again, turn 5 here, we've got Jane. That's just the easy play. We don't want to play her into Vormir because we want her 8 power. The only other option would be Strange Academy, and it seems like a waste sending her through Lockjaw. We'll take her 8 power on the Thor lane, and we're going to get our Wasp and Mjolnir for our turn 6. They play Vision, which is a really solid play. I love Vision. I wish he was a little bit stronger. I think maybe an 8 power would be, maybe make him playable in pretty much any deck. He's also potentially a good inclusion in this deck as well. But as you can see here, we've got Mjolnir down. We've got Wasp ready to go. We're looking to break Vormir with Mjolnir. And then we're going to send Wasp through Lockjaw. Then we still have the energy to play a 6-drop as well. So we're actually considering just playing Mjolnir, sending Dr. Doom through, and then using Wasp to hit their Jane. So Mjolnir comes out. It's going to buff up our Thor, breaks Vormir for us. That allows us to... Well, Dr. Doom's going to come through first. We're going to add 5 into Vormir. Cyclops comes out. Wasp comes down as well. We are up 7. They ended up playing their own Dr. Doom and their Mjolnir. And I believe they've got a Wasp of their own here. Yep, they've got a Wasp of their own. They were not playing the High Evolutionary version. We were, and we end up getting a big victory over them. All right, so just a couple final words about this deck. I love its consistency. It seems like you're always able to get a bunch of power out there. I think the High Evolutionary package, you're making the most out of the best cards in that group. So I think that is huge. Like I said, the one change that I would potentially think about making would be for Chavez. Chavez and Cyclops, right? I think we could potentially take Chavez out and include the Infinite. I think that would be solid. Now, I really like Cyclops, and I like making sure we've got a turn 3 play, but I could definitely see a replacement for him. We talked a little bit about Vision. Having him in this deck might not be a bad idea. Other than that, I'm not sure there's too many other cards that we would want. Potentially Dracula. I've seen him in quite a few of these decks as well, and it totally makes sense. Infinite can get stuck in your hand. You could have a huge Hulk as well. You could send Dr. Doom through, so you could get a ton of value out of Dracula. So a couple potential options to replace Cyclops. Dracula, we could add Infinite, but overall, I think this deck is super, super strong. You can tinker with it a little bit depending on your play style and what you like. And I think this is one that is worth giving a shot. Like I said, this is what I'm personally using to climb right now. And we're only a few games away from Infinite. So I think we're going to get there over the next day or two here. And hopefully I'll have a video for y'all then. But if you hung around until now, I do really appreciate you. Now would be a good time to go ahead and hit that subscribe and like button if you haven't. But until next time, have some fun.